How's it going, team? Welcome back to another episode of the Average Jacks podcast, where we bring you real conversations with incredible people. I'm your host, Jack McKeenan, and today's guest is someone I'm really excited to share with you. We're talking to the Period Nutritionist, Molly Sykes. Molly is a nutritionist who's on a mission to help women balance their hormones, heal their menstrual cycles, and truly thrive by understanding how diet and lifestyle can deeply impact their overall health. She takes a holistic approach to everything she does, and in today's episode, we dive into her personal journey, how she got to where she is to today, and the real life experience that shaped her path. We also cover some shocking insights about how much your diet and lifestyle can really affect your menstrual cycle, whether you're dealing with hormone imbalances or just curious about the connection between nutrition and menstrual health. This episode is full of useful, eye-opening information. But before we jump in, a quick shout out to our sponsor, Virba Strength. Get 20% off their fitness gear by using the code AverageJack at www.virbastrength.co.uk. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to subscribe and leave us a review. It really helps us grow and keeps bringing you great content. Also, for more updates and content, head over to www.jackmckeenan.co.uk. Now, let's dive into the podcast with Molly. Peace. Yeah, perfect. Really sorry about that. Just everything that could go wrong decided it was going to go wrong. How are you feeling now?
It's the first day that I feel like to have, which is good.
Good. Yeah, it's always good to sort of feel 100% when doing something like this because it is quite. I think people don't realise that it's quite taxing to sort of just be so tuned into a conversation for quite a long time.
Yeah.
Because you're just sort of like laser focused into it. Well, usually, anyway.
Yeah, it's like that brain power as well. Just
Yeah, just getting into like a proper flow state and just staying there. But thank you very much for obviously jumping on the podcast. I appreciate it. I have said to you, like when we've been messaging and stuff, apologies if I'm not very versed in the topic that we're going to discuss today, but I think it's a really cool thing that you're doing. I think it's really interesting, and I'm sure a lot of people would get benefit for it. So for people who don't know who you are, when I get guests on, I normally start from the beginning, a bit of an overview into who you are as a person and sort of what got you to where you are at this point, if that's okay to start.
Totally. Yeah. Sounds good. No, I'm looking forward to chatting with you about it and hearing another perspective as well. So I think that'll be a good chat.
Yeah, so yeah, just I'm sure it'll be sort of explained in like layman's terms for me. So I'm assuming anyone who listens to it, it'll be a good sort of base level to get in. So like, if you look back from when you was sort of, younger and sort of what you wanted to do when you was older, is this where you'd expect to be if you look back now?
I think so. I think I've always been interested in nutrition, and it's only because of my own personal struggles that I've ended up in the world of hormone health and women's menstrual cycles. So yeah, it seems like a natural progression to end up here, really. And it's quite nice to be working for myself and also working in an area that I'm so passionate about. So yeah, it definitely hasn't been one of those, when I grow up I want to teach women about their menstrual cycles.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely, in the health space and where I sort of saw myself going, I guess.
So how did it sort of come around to getting into nutrition? So you mentioned there that you sort of expected to get into this sort of, maybe not this specific niche of, like hormone health and women's menstrual cycles and stuff like that, but what was always sort of the giveaway that you knew you was going to get into nutrition?
Yeah, so I mean, at school I was always quite sporty, loved PE, did every after school club there was. So when it came to picking a uni, because everyone goes to uni, and it was just like that natural next step. I was like, oh, my good at, I quite like sport, so I went down the exercise science route, and absolutely loved it. And then, fortunately, with like my degree, it was a very broad range of everything to do with health, from like physiology to nutrition to psychology. And nutrition was what I was really interested in. And then when I was struggling with my own nutrition and health in my undergrad, it made sense to me to do my master's in nutrition, partly out of interest, and I think partly out of desperation as well, not knowing how to eat and take care of my own body. So yeah, I was always going to end up in the health space, and it was just through my own personal experiences that I gained such a passion in nutrition and an interest in it.
And I think something you mentioned then, which is, something that's not uncommon for sort of the everyday person, is not really knowing a lot about nutrition and the foods we should be having, and the impact that has on our hormones, our mood, everything that we do. We're sort of taught, I think anyway, in school, sort of a dumbed down version of nutrition and what we should be eating. It's very sort of cookie cutter. It's sort of, oh well, it's one fits all, and that's just not the case, is it? And you mentioned there obviously your own personal journey with that, and sort of was there like an epiphany or sort of that sort of eureka moment to be, right, this is what I need to do and this is how I'm doing it, or was it just like you mentioned, sort of a compounding effect?
Yeah, I guess there wasn't so much a eureka moment. I think for me, because so I really, throughout my whole undergraduate degree, I was struggling with my weight, anxiety, irregular and missing periods, acne, like every hormone problem under the sun, I've had it. But this 4-year degree, I was spending hours a day studying health, and I was like, why on earth do I not know how to improve my own health? And then I was also going to the doctors, and they were just as sort of confused as I was. I really wasn't getting the answers I needed. I think, like you say, through education, nutrition is just so basic. I think they give you like that health or nutrition pyramid, like carbs, protein, fats, and it's a real surface level understanding. And it's the same in like the medical profession as well. Doctors, I think they get 8 hours of nutrition training in their 5-year medical degree. So yeah, my own health, I just didn't know where I was going wrong. I went to the doctors, they didn't know what was going on. And it got to the point where I guess my epiphany moment was when I was sat in the GP, and she had given me, I think I was on my 4th type of hormonal birth control to try and rebalance my hormones and manage my cycle. And she's gone to me, yeah, it seems like hormones just don't work for you. And I was like, oh, so what else can I do? And she was like, oh, well, try this pill instead. And that's when I was like, okay, I'm going to have to take this into my own hands, because you don't know, I don't know. And yeah, that was the moment when I realised that I had to find this answer myself. And I think that was just before I chose to do my master's in nutrition. So you shouldn't have to do a master's degree to understand nutrition, but at the time that was what I had to do.
That's a very expensive solution to your problem, isn't it? To sort of be like, right, well, the only way I'm going to figure this out is if I go and fucking do a master's in it. And you see a lot of it. I mean, I've not obviously got a master's or a degree of anything of that level, but sort of working in leisure and fitness, you get a lot of people where they go to, GPs and healthcare, and, it's a brilliant thing that we have, but it always seems to be, oh, we'll take this to solve this problem, or, sleep apnea. Or I wouldn't say I'm overweight. I wouldn't say I'm a massive guy, but I went and I was like, well, how do I fix it? What can I do to, improve this? And he was like, lose weight. You should be like 13 stone 10. And I was like, in what world am I going to lose 2.5 stone and sort of, feel good about it? But just because they go off these metrics like BMI and things like that, which are just bollocks at most of the time, you just think, you sort of lose confidence. And is that what happened with you? Did you sort of lose confidence in that process and just sort of go, all right, grab the bull by the horns, I'm just going to do it myself?
Yeah, totally. So they do, I always feel like they do try and fit everyone into that same like cookie cutter shape, but our bodies are so different. And yeah, when you're you're getting given pills and you're not actually getting given answers, particularly with like a GP appointment where you get 5 minutes to tell them
Yeah.
all these issues you're experiencing and they give you just the same solution or a different pill every time. That's when I realised to take it into my own hands.
Yeah, the sort of speed dating approach of you've got so long to fix these problems, and that's no one's fault, is it? But it's sort of when you just go in, like you said, 4 times, that you were just going round in circles. So when you made the decision to go into the masters and you started to learn about it, when did you sort of get that realization that it's through nutrition and it's through what you put in your body that can really have sort of an impact on your hormones and your cycle and things like that? Because I don't think a lot of people would sort of put two and two together with that and expect them to sort of marry well.
Yeah. Yeah, it was through that masters that I also began to understand on a cellular level how our nutrition affects our health and our hormones, and particularly like protein is made of amino acids, and amino acids build hormones, and then so many of our hormones are produced in the gut, so our gut microbiome has a huge impact on our hormone balance. So really, the food we eat affects our hormones in every way, and there's no part of our being that isn't touched by our nutrition, like your mental health, physical health, how you look, feel, productivity at work, relationships. So that's, yeah, I think through the degree I really understood the science between how that all works. But then through my own experience, when I started to make the changes in my own life, I then realised that, oh, I'm not having these random panic attacks anymore, and I've lost a stone without even thinking about it, and I've got my libido back. I've got a better relationship with my partner again. I want to go out and socialise. So yeah, I think the degree was great for the science background, and then through actually living it myself, I really gained that first-hand experience on how powerful your nutrition can be. And now I can relate to my clients who are going through all the same struggles.
Before we get to your business now and sort of working for yourself, doing the masters and then moving on from the masters, was there any sort of pushback with going down this route and sort of having this message? Because it is very much against sort of societal norms, isn't it? To sort of like move away from medication and think about, your nutrition and well-being. That's sort of not the message that we're taught. So was there any pushback at these sort of milestones in your life, like the masters, going into work, and then finally getting to sort of working for yourself?
Yeah, I think particularly when you're talking about the menstrual cycle, the sort of, people would say, taboo topics, periods and things, like I like to share a lot of information on social media because obviously I want this knowledge to be free, and I don't want people to go through the struggle I went through. I really think that this information should just be out there for everyone. But there's things that you wouldn't even think of, like talking about periods on TikTok or Instagram can lead to less views because it's a taboo topic, so the algorithm won't promote it. And then obviously there's people as well, even like my own dad struggles to watch my videos because that generation, he just really cringes at these sorts of topics. So I think society is doing better. We're definitely improving in terms of just opening up about these things, and there are so many amazing influencers and health professionals out there who are making this far more well known and widespread. But yeah, I think it's going to be a real process and just that gradual shift in society. And again, like having these conversations with your partners and friends rather than, just speaking to your doctor. Or, yeah, the more we talk about it, the easier it's going to become. Definitely getting easier for me now. And I think companies are getting on board as well. It's becoming much more mainstream, which really helps.
Well, you mentioned there about it being easy for you to talk about. And obviously, isn't it? People do see it as sort of a taboo subject, anything in sort of this regard. And was it awkward for you initially as well to sort of raise this issue and then approach people with it? Because I can imagine that it must have been, especially like you mentioned your dad there, and there'll be people that I talk to, and they'll probably be like, it was what you had who on, and like it's everyday life, isn't it? I think there's so many women who go through these issues of like like irregular cycles and stuff like that, and endometritis and things like that. Even just speaking to people that I know, it's a lot more common than you think. Yeah, I can imagine me at 18 years old could never imagine having this chat. But how was it for you, and how did you sort of get over sort of just the taboo in itself?
I mean, I'm a shy girl, so I did struggle. And I think in the beginning I was using different words. I'd be like, oh, the blob, or that time of the month,
Yeah.
or whatever. But it just takes practice. And I think it helps that I'm always talking about it on social media now. And I don't even think about it anymore. But definitely in the beginning, there'd be that hesitation, a bit of self-doubt and even cringe in myself. But
Yeah,
yeah,
the little pause just before you said it sort of thing.
yeah, you just gotta keep talking about it and then you get used to it.
It's like anything, isn't it? I think the more you do something, EPS is always seen as sort of a fitness like word, but repetition just in anything you do in life always makes things easier. So yeah, it's good to know that even sort of yourself at some point was like a bit uneasy with it. It makes me feel a little bit better, because there's been times in the past when I've definitely, I think, especially from a man's perspective, it's something that we have no real understanding of, and that's probably like you mentioned about a generational thing. I'd say it's very recent where people have these discussions and sort of take the time to learn about it. But in reality, it is important, because most people, if they're the partner, they go through it. You have these issues and stuff. So to actually have the education and sort of a bit of knowledge to navigate it and support, I think it's a really cool thing that you're doing to help sort of explain it to laymen like me who have no idea. So you mentioned there about you now work for yourself. So a bit about that. How did that? What was the step to be like, right? It's time for me to sort of break away from working with companies, working for other people, and sort of go full into this.
Yeah, I think I was always probably going to work for myself because that's what my parents both do. So I just, from a young age, I saw the lifestyle they have and thought that's what I wanted to do. And I worked with loads of really great nutrition companies and had, on paper, amazing jobs. But I just wasn't getting that purpose. I wasn't waking up every day and loving what I do and really feeling like I was doing what I'm meant to be doing. So I did make the leap quite recently to just completely invest 100% of my time in my business, and I just really love having that one-to-one connection with my clients and supporting them on a really personal level with their hormone journey, because it is such a personal journey to be going through, and it really requires that one-to-one support and attention. And I just feel like I owe it to myself and my clients to give them my all. And now I'm just so happy that I get to wake up doing what I love, and it's so worth it when someone gets a win or gets their period back. So yeah, it was scary, but I'm happy I made the leap.
I mean, you can just sort of tell, just speaking to you and sort of how you speak about it, like how sort of rewarding it must be for yourself. So you spoke there about working with clients. How do you approach sort of, again, going back to what we've mentioned and we've talked about sort of the societal norms of this and sort of what we were probably taught in school and sort of the education that we was given, which is, follows probably using like pharmaceuticals and stuff like that. How do you approach making that sort of substantial change for people who come to you and, they're like, oh, I've tried everything, I've tried every pill, I've done this. Is there any reluctance from people to sort of go trust nutrition and do this? And how do you approach that?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, especially because we have all grown up, you do trust your doctor, and as you should. But I think particularly if you're, say, going on like a pill to try and resolve a problem with your hormones in your period, that's not the best solution, because something that I see all the time is like, yes, going on the pill can be a quick fix if you've got painful periods or skin breakouts and PMS, but that only works because the hormones in the pill aren't the same as the ones in our body. They're synthetic chemicals and they look similar, but they're not the same and they don't affect us in the same way. So when you go on the pill, rather than rebalancing your hormones, it completely overrides your natural cycle. So that will then mask the symptoms that you've experienced. But then when you come off the pill later down the line, because maybe you want to have a baby or you just want to have a natural cycle again, those problems are still going to be there, and often they come back with a vengeance as well. So rather than taking the pill for that quick fix, we really want to look for the root cause of the issue. Because really, our menstrual cycle is our fifth vital sign, and it's our body's way of saying, something's not right here. And we really owe it to ourselves to listen to it and, understand what's actually going on. Are you chronically stressed? Are you not sleeping? Have you got all this inflammation? Are you under eating? What actually is going on in the body, and what can we do to fix it? And then your symptoms will get better as a result.
But from that though, you mentioned, some of the things that cause like irregular periods and sort of issues with the menstrual cycle and that. What are the most common things that you see? Is the one that always sort of bumps out, and it's the one like it's not the pill necessarily, but what could be causing it, before they make the decision to take the pill to sort of for the solution? What is it? What normally causes the issues that you see, if that makes sense? Sorry, I've just butchered that.
That's okay. Do you mean as in like the root cause of the problems with their health, or the reason?
Yeah. Yeah, so like prior to them taking the pill as a solution, when they obviously explain to you, I've been doing this, like you said, chronic stress, under eating, them sort of things. What is probably the most common one?
I'd say generally it is very stress, nutrition, lifestyle related. Interestingly, so these days we're stressed all the time, and our body is constantly in that fight or flight mode. And years and years and years ago, if you were being, say, chased by a tiger, your body would shut down any non-essential systems so that you could run away and survive. And these days, our body doesn't actually understand that our life isn't being threatened at all times anymore. It doesn't know if you're being chased by a tiger or if your boss has sent you a crappy email. And it's like shutting down all these systems just to help you survive. And your reproductive system is the first thing that goes out the window. Because obviously, if you're not safe, then you can't have a baby and reproduce. So, yeah, generally stress is a huge one. Not getting the right nutrition and just having quite an unhealthy lifestyle can cause so many problems.
I think it's interesting you mentioned that, because I've had people on for different areas and different sort of backgrounds, and if they have sort of client-based businesses and they work with people, they always mention about, a couple of times now, people have mentioned sort of our brains aren't really processed to deal with modern day issues. We sort of got this,
it's still wired to, like you said, being chased by tigers and things like that, and sort of being overstimulated by social media and like I said, crappy emails off your boss. What are sort of the things that you recommend to your clients and people that you work with to sort of de-stress? Is there anything sort of that is always a go-to for you to first and foremost try to sort of calm and just relax a little bit more?
Totally. It's different for everyone, really. I always suggest that people should take 10 minutes out of their day, just do one thing that improves their stress, whether it's like going for a walk, journaling, meditating. It looks different for everyone, but making your stress management a priority and consistently, committing to managing your stress every single day is the first step to even just addressing it and coming out of that fight or flight autopilot loop that you get stuck in so easily. So yeah, I think for me, I spend every evening, I'll do 10 minutes of like either reading a book or writing my thoughts and feelings. Whereas like my partner, he'll make sure that he gets out and goes for a walk every single day, rain or shine. So yeah.
And it's so important. It is so important to find that time to almost disconnect and not be sort of attached to our other limb in what our technology is for a lot of people. Yeah, I've obviously did a bit of looking into socials and the stuff that you post, and you did was it the 30 habits that you did the reels and stuff, which I love. Obviously, like this podcast is all based off the book that I did, which is about habits and everything like that. So how important are habits for this, and sort of creating them sort of pathways to get to that point of not relying on medicines and reducing that stress? Is it what you always sort of say to be like habits are what you need to do? I think people sometimes they just think, oh, there's this one thing that I need to do, and once I do that, that's it, I'm sorted then. But when in reality, a lot of what we need to do is sort of ingrain it into our nature. And do you find that a lot of people don't have the correct habits?
Yeah, totally. Habits are the key. There is no magic pill, no quick fix. It's all about habits. And I get clients come to me and they expect almost like a set meal plan or a diet that they'll go away and do and it'll fix all their problems. But in reality, no one's going to actually be able to stick to that. There's no point in going for that perfectionist, all or nothing mindset because ultimately it's not going to last. Whereas if you just implement a few, easy, sustainable, healthy habits and build on them with time, that's what's going to improve your long-term health and give you that balance in your life as well. So yeah, and that was something I learned. I did all the diets and took every pill and supplement under the sun. But then when I started just, adding a few little daily changes and improvements, that's when I saw actual results in my health.
Yeah, the compounding's massive. It's something that I bang on about all the time. Is you don't need to take big steps to make big changes. It's normally the opposite. You need to take a lot of small steps to make them big changes. So from your own sort of journey, and I normally do this a little bit later on, but while we're on the topic now, I think it's just a sort of a good time to ask it. What are sort of the 3 habits that, are most vital to you as an individual, and what you would recommend to, people in a situation that you was in before you made your change?
Yeah, so I would say there are key pillars to our health. Generally, for most people, there's 3 or 4 that are the most important, which would be their nutrition, exercise, and usually either sleep or stress. So when I think of the most important habits for me, they focus on at least one of those pillars. So the first one for me is having a nourishing breakfast every day. So I used to wake up, have coffees until like 2 o'clock, and then I'd have my first meal, and my stress hormones, cortisol, headaches, everything would be completely out of whack. and then I'd be starving, hungry, and then it was just such a bad start to the day. But yeah, I'll wake up, I'll have a balanced breakfast, my protein, carbs, fats, and that's just the best way to make sure I'm getting the nutrition I need first thing in the morning, providing my body with the fuel it needs, and setting myself up for a good day every day. So that'd be my first one. The second one is movement. Just 10 minutes of movement every single day, whether it's walking, dancing in the kitchen while you're making dinner, going to a class, anything that gets you out of your seat, gets that blood pumping, and again, prioritizing it every single day is really key. And then the third one for me is sleep. So I make sure that I wake up and go to bed at the exact same time every day, weekday and weekends, and making sure I get those 8 hours of sleep to really regulate my circadian rhythm, regulate my hormones, and make sure that my body's got that time to rest and recuperate after a long day.
I love that. And you just said you took the words out of my mouth then, because you just mentioned the circadian rhythm. How much of an impact does the circadian rhythm have on menstrual cycle and things like that?
Huge. Because our hormones, it is a cycle itself, and our circadian rhythm can really impact what hormones are being released or not released at different times of the day. So, for example, when we wake up in the morning, we get a big cortisol spike because that stress hormone is actually what gets us out of bed. And then it will naturally come down as the morning goes on. But then in the evening, our melatonin spikes up and that makes us tired and helps us sleep. But if you're getting up and going to bed at different times each day, our body doesn't really know when to release those hormones. And then particularly if you're getting in bed and you're scrolling on your phone, looking at a blue screen for an hour, that's suppressing your melatonin as well, which is going to hugely affect your sleep quality and your energy levels. So yeah, our body loves routine, it loves rhythms, and the circadian rhythm is really key for that.
It's going back to sort of the habits and the routines again, isn't it? It's funny how much it sort of always creeps up. So moving on from that, and something we've obviously touched on it sort of little bits and stuff with, your own personal journey and then that of your clients. There's the general approach to sort of women's health and menstrual cycles. Where do you think it's falling short in society? Like, is it schools? Is it, doctors, that sort of thing? Is there one particular place where you think it could be better to sort of grow awareness?
I think to start with, women need to be more included in the science and the research, because there's been such a gap in the research for so many years, because obviously having a menstrual cycle means that our body changes all month long, and when researchers are doing studies to have reliable, consistent results, they would need to recruit their participants with them all being in the same phase of their cycle, and it's essentially more work, more money, more time. So for years and years, they've only studied men. And even, I was looking at something earlier that said the FDA implemented this guideline whereby women couldn't be included in clinical experiments unless it was for a life-threatening condition. This was implemented in 1977, not that long ago, and they only lifted it in 1993. So that's years and years of women literally just not being researched at all, which is why we're only learning now what's actually going on with our bodies. So I think
that's crazy.
Starting with the science, it's so crazy. Yeah, starting with the science, and then obviously when we then get these results and this research, we can educate doctors, we can provide more education in schools, which again, there's a huge gap with the schools as well. They don't do really any menstrual cycle education at all. So hopefully, as it becomes less taboo and more people are talking about it, that can be more involved in the school curriculum. It's not just wishful thinking from me.
But it seems to be, growing. There seems to be more knowledge about it, and it's coming into like social media. Obviously, the algorithm isn't helping, but there definitely seems to be increasing sort of the awareness of it. You see it a lot more, not a lot more, but you see it more than you did on, TV and things like that, and streaming like this and podcasting and things like that. But going back to something you mentioned before, about the different phases and things like that. Could you explain them and what they are, just for people like myself who only have a very vague sort of understanding and probably not a brilliant understanding? I think it'd be good to sort of go into the basics for anyone to sort of get a good rounded view.
Totally. Yeah, the easiest way to understand it is almost like the seasons. So a woman's cycle starts on the very first day of her period, which is her menstrual phase, and this is essentially like her winter. So all the hormones are at their lowest. She's obviously feeling like staying in, not feeling very social or confident. It's really like a bit of a hibernation phase. And then, so the menstrual phase should last from 5 to 7 days. And then once she comes out of her period, these hormone levels will start to rise. And that then enters her into her follicular phase. And this is like spring. So estrogen is the main hormone for this phase, and this makes her feel more confident, more outgoing, a bit more productive and focused and creative. So as those hormones are rising, she's feeling really good. And then the next part is ovulation. And for me, this is like the main event of the menstrual cycle. It's what we do it all for. But the woman will ovulate, the egg will be released from the ovary into the tubes, fallopian tubes. And yes, that is when obviously she could get pregnant. And because our body essentially, like, we need to remember we are animals and the body is designed to reproduce. So when we're fertile and we've ovulated, all our hormones are peaking and we're feeling our absolute best, feeling more flirty, more frisky, more confident. There's even some science to say that our face shifts and becomes a bit more symmetrical to attract mates. We emit different smells. So yeah, that would be your ovulation and that would be our summer. And then once we pass ovulation, we come into the luteal phase, which is the longest phase. It's usually around 2 weeks long, and progesterone becomes our dominant hormone. So progesterone essentially helps to take care of the body in case we've conceived and it's pregnant. So as these hormones are coming down, it's also known as our calming hormone. So we become a bit more introverted again, a bit more reflective, and then we're easing back into the menstrual phase. So yeah, and that's, your winter, your autumn, sorry. So yeah, hopefully that was...
That's probably the best I've ever heard it explained. So yeah, to think of it of like seasons makes perfect sense. Like I said, when we was in school and you get, your 20-minute sort of video of your cartoon diagram on the smartboard, and everyone's like looking away and doesn't want to see it. And they're just fighting a losing battle. But yeah, that made perfect sense. So thank you for explaining that, because, there was some things in that I didn't even have a clue about. Which is sort of, it's crazy to think, and like you mentioned there about sort of the education and things like that. Where would sort of, I'm trying to think of the best way to word this and not sort of butcher it so it makes like sense. Is it sort of, groups and sort of, there's a word I'm looking for, like forums and that, of people like yourself that are, trying to spread this message and get, education out there for more people? Or is it quite sort of a lonely path for you?
I've personally found it to be quite lonely, because I feel like there's so many amazing health professionals out there who, specialise in whatever their skill may be, whether they're nutritionists or like massage therapists or other like life coaches who focus on women's health, and they generally work individually to promote the same message and help people learn about their bodies. But it's felt lonely up to this point. I think more women's health clinics are coming about, and there are more communities on social media which are really helping. But it's just like such a process. It takes time with these things, and it's just the right people talking and connecting and finding each other, really. So, yeah, I think up till now, it's probably been quite an individual battle, but luckily there's lots of people spreading the same message. So hopefully we can all come together and get everyone on board.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds great. And I was trying to sort of word it in a way that made sense, though it's sort of being confusing, but it's very niche, isn't it? It sounds crazy to say it's niche because, you know, all women go through it, but like again, going into sort of societal norms and everything we've covered, it does make it sort of a bit of a ballsy move to go and be like, right, this is what I'm going to lock down and I'm going to do this and focus on this. So what for you, what would be sort of the progress and where would you want to see it be in like maybe the next 5 or 10 years? You know, just like creating some of them groups or just the education being better. What would be sort of the ideal situation for you?
Yeah, I think I would love for there to be more education in the future. I think it's so important to be teaching kids in schools about their menstrual cycles, not only so they can know when things are going wrong and when they need help, but also so they can just like optimize their life. Since, you know, living more in tune with my cycle, like I'm in my follicular phase, which is why I thought this would be a great day to do the podcast. Whereas if I was in my luteal phase, this chat would be completely different. I'd be so much more anxious. So things like that can just help you be more productive at work, feel better in your relationships. So yeah, starting with that education, I think is key. And then just having more of those conversations, like being able to talk openly to your partner or your mum or your friend about your cycle. Because even when you're in a relationship, like my boyfriend understands the phases of the cycle and he knows how to, I wouldn't say treat me differently, but how to maybe approach things differently.
Navigate it. Yeah.
yeah, navigate things
We
depending
could
on.
all definitely learn to do that. Definitely, I think it'd make everyone's life a lot easier if, you know, as partners we learned how to sort of understand what is in our favour and what's not.
Totally. A really funny, ridiculous example is like sometimes I hate it when people make me jump, but like a couple weeks ago he made me jump and it was just before my period and I just burst into tears for like no reason at all. It just got me and my hormones at the wrong time and I absolutely sobbed and there was no explanation other than he jumped out me in the wrong phase of my cycle. So
Yeah. And if it had been another day, he might have got like a dig, or he might have got a laugh. And yeah,
yeah.
so he's gonna have to time it a little bit better when he tries to do some jump scares on you.
Yeah, it was not there. But yeah, I think if you can understand your partner's cycle, it has such a huge impact on your relationship, which is awesome.
Something interesting you put on the other day was about chemicals and sort of it shocked me when you was talking about like the chemicals in like commonly used sanitary products and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you want to just touch about that a little bit because that is crazy?
Yes. This study came out, as we were saying, the science is so far behind. The study came out last month finding toxic chemicals in tampons. And in every single tampon they tested, including organic tampons, they found 16 types of metals, including lead, which has no safe exposure level. So, you know, any exposure to lead is going to negatively affect your health. And these are being inserted in the most absorbent and sensitive parts of the woman's body. So some people are saying that we don't know how this is actually affecting our health because they haven't researched it yet. But even the fact that these metals are going into the body and being worn for hours at a time, a whole week of every month, it's so crazy that it's only even been discovered until now. But yeah, there's just such a huge lack of understanding of what's in these products and how they're affecting our health.
And I suppose the same, obviously assuming here, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I imagine the same goes for the pill and, you know, the sort of birth control things, the different sort of aspects, because there's so many different variations of it. And, you know, do you think there needs to be more education on sort of the negatives of that? Because I think it's always sort of portrayed as a very positive thing and has all these, you know, amazing sort of benefits. And in some sense, they do, but you never hear about the real sort of negative side of it.
Yeah, I think there needs to be lots more informed consent when it comes to the pill, because you go to the GP with a problem like irregular periods, and even at as early as 14, 15, you're given the pill to manage those symptoms without the real understanding and knowledge of how that's affecting your body. So the pill affects the body in every way, from like your skin and your weight to your mental health. I think I saw a statistic that I can't remember now, but young teenage girls who are on the pill are more likely to commit suicide than those who aren't, because of the effect it can have on levels of depression and anxiety. And people just aren't aware of that, and they'll maybe go on the pill for a minor problem, not understanding the huge effect it has on your health. So yeah, I feel like we finally have got the information and we do actually know the effect that the pill can have, but because it's been a solution for so long and everyone's different, so there really aren't any crazy, you know, it's so hard to change something that's so deeply ingrained.
Yeah.
Regardless of, you know, the risk of stroke and all these stats that we do have on the pill, it's such an easy solution at the moment that it's really hard to change that. And people don't want to really take the time to do the work and get to that root cause of the problem, usually when they can just take a pill. So yeah, the pill could be a whole podcast episode in itself, just because of the huge impact it
Yeah.
has. But I think
It goes.
I was just
No, go on.
saying,
Sorry.
I think people just need to have the information to make that decision rather than being given a pill, just that as a starting point.
And it goes back to what you mentioned before about there being no quick fixes, there being no magic pill, pardon the pun. And I think just from what you said there and sort of the little understanding I have, that's what it's sold as sometimes, isn't it? It's this one cure, sort of fix all your problems.
Totally. Yeah, it's just so easy to use, and I think because so many people have used it, you know, our mums, grandmas, friends, why would you go to the effort of seeing a private nutritionist and getting hormone tests and blood tests when you could just take a pill to mask those symptoms? But then later down the line, when you're having issues with your mental health or your weight or your fertility, that's when it's a problem. But you don't know that when you start taking it at 14, 15 years old.
And it's such a important time of your life and such a developmental time. You're developing so much and everything's changing. And like you mentioned about sort of creating, it's the synthetic sort of, you said it, I'm butchering it, but it's replacing it with sort of it being synthetic rather than the actual what the body's creating. And does that have sort of, is there any studies to suggest? Probably not, because you mentioned it before, that there's not a lot of studies. But with that period of developing and sort of your body's going through so many changes as it is, to sort of go on to something that has such a detrimental might not be the right word, but has such a profound effect on changing your body and how it reacts. Do you think sort of going through puberty and taking the pill at the same time causes even more sort of stress on the body?
Yeah, again, everyone's different. And to be honest, I'm not anti the pill. There are scenarios whereby it can be helpful, particularly in conditions like PCOS or endometriosis. It can have a beneficial effect on people's symptoms and their fertility. So it's completely individual. I guess, like, as you say, when you're in those really developmental stages of life, and you're then taking a pill that does change the chemical structure of your brain and how those connections are forming, then it shouldn't just be a quick prescription. And like, I guess, for example, you mentioned like the hormones versus the chemicals. So we said about progesterone is our calming hormone in our luteal phase, and it's really protective. It's great for our bone health, our muscle building, our mental health. It's got all these benefits. Whereas progestin, which is the synthetic chemical in the pill, essentially has the opposite effect. It doesn't give us any of these benefits at all. So when you're making that swap at a young age, when our bones are developing, our body's changing, that's inevitably going to have such an effect in the long term on our health and our development.
Makes perfect sense. Sort of like, like I said, I have no sort of, not opinion. Well, yeah, I have no opinion because I have no sort of education on the matter as in depth as someone who experiences it or someone like yourself. But when you say it like that, there's definitely, it seems such a massive decision that's just put onto people so sort of willy-nilly. It's just like, here it is, that sound, don't worry about sort of all the issues that could come of it. And like you said, there is, and that was what I was going to ask you, is there sort of scenarios where, it is sort of viable and needed? So, and that's, again, it comes back to the education, doesn't it? It needs to be more people like you to sort of be in the room and be like, yeah, it's not just a tick box. It's not like giving out hay fever tablets or aspirin inhalers or something like that. So with people sort of, if they're listening to this and they're sort of thinking, oh shit, yeah, this is me, I'm in that scenario, which I hope they're not in that scenario, but I hope they're listening to it and sort of getting something from this to be like, there is a solution, there is something that I can do. Sort of obviously coming to you and speaking to you would be sort of first port of call, but what is sort of the steps of transition, like coming off, the pill or the birth control that's causing that? Is there any sort of initial steps that everyone should maybe consider or take before doing it or during it?
Yeah, I think particularly if you're taking the pill or any hormonal contraceptive and you want to come off that, it's really important for the 3 months prior to be optimizing your nutrition and lifestyle, making sure you're having a really nourishing whole foods diet with some key nutrients like magnesium, iron, because the pill can cause deficiencies as well. So making sure that as long as you're having a balanced whole foods, very plant-rich diet with, again, really high quality protein and fats, that's going to help to support your body for that transition. And then with your other lifestyle factors as well, like exercising, managing your stress levels, optimizing your sleep, these are all the best ways to just help your body through this period. But then I guess everyone is so different, and sometimes you can get post-pill syndrome, which is things like acne or weight gain or spikes of anxiety when you come off the pill, just because your body is going through almost a second puberty, because it's having to figure out its cycle all over again, and your hormones are almost, if you went on the pill when you were 14, before you've gone through puberty, it's really halted that process until you then come off it at, say, 24, 10 years later. Your body needs to then figure out how to have a natural menstrual cycle again. So it can take 2 years for your body to go back to what we would say normal, have a natural cycle. Some people it's quicker. I usually see it takes about 6 months to feel okay again. So yeah, just supporting your body as best as you can. I would recommend obviously working with a professional if that's something you can do. But if not, it's just whatever you can do to really prioritise good health and take care of yourself in any way you can.
I'm a bit in shock of it. Like, can take up to sort of like 2 years. That's just crazy for sort of the body to sort of get itself sort of back in tune. And you mentioned there about setting good foundations prior to that, which is obviously great to hear because it's sort of, again, building that habit and that routine, isn't it? We've obviously talked about the pill a lot, but there's obviously other sort of birth controls like the coil, and they have similar outcomes with effects on people's cycles and that.
Yeah, I mean, generally, most forms of birth control stop you from ovulating, which is obviously how they stop you from having a baby. But as I said, ovulation is amazing. It's so important. It's so beneficial to your health. It stimulates a load of hormonal processes that are excellent for your longevity, your mental health, physical health. Ovulation in itself is such an amazing physiological process for just improving your wellness. So when you take that away and you don't ovulate for months or years, then that's always going to have a lasting effect on you. And it can take a long time to get that ovulation back, essentially. So yeah, there are some forms of contraception where you can still ovulate. I think like with the copper coil, that changes the environment in the cervix, but then that has other effects like inflammation from the copper. So generally, naturally tracking your cycle and using a natural fertility awareness method is optimal when it comes to your hormone health. But again, that takes time and commitment to understand and figure out how to do.
But I mean, yeah, I'm just enjoying learning a lot about it because there's so much to it and so much that I didn't know. I sort of expected to have no idea, but I didn't realise how I felt like I had a bit of an understanding about sort of the impact and, you know, the repercussions of, you know, like contraception and stuff like that and the pill. But I didn't realise sort of how long that is and sort of how long it takes to sort of let the body retune. It's scary. Do you know what I mean? Like hearing you speak about it sort of makes me think that, why would you sort of use this as a first port of call? Why would you put someone sort of through it? I know it has its place, like you said, and it's mentioned, but it is a bit mad to think that this is just sort of the first port of call always, and the fact that, you know, people like yourself who are working on the nutrition and balancing the hormones naturally through, you know, proper well-being and things, and it just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense that that's not sort of the go-to.
Totally. And I don't want anyone to like feel scared, but then it's about having, as I said, that informed consent, knowing what you're signing yourself up for, essentially. Because lots of women as well, they'll come off the pill in their 30s and start trying to have a baby without realising that it can take that year or two to even just start to ovulate again. And then, you know, if you're in your 30s, as those years go on, the chances of getting pregnant decreases. So it's just knowing, being prepared, understanding what's going on and knowing what to do to support your body during that process.
Do you think that's why, obviously this is a bit of a different subject and another taboo subject, but do you think that's why there's maybe some more sort of the fertility issues with people when they're, you know, I think people sort of, they come off the pill and probably they don't understand, they don't have this sort of information, what you just shared, because I didn't even know it, to, you know, they come off the pill and think, right, I'm going to try for a baby, and like, oh, why is it not working? Why is it not doing this? The sort of, just from what you see, I think like IVF and fertility is something, again, that's a less taboo sort of subject and is out in sort of mainstream media more. But do you think they have maybe a connection just because of obviously how frequently like the pill is sort of just given out to use, and like you said, the effect that it has to sort of align once you've come off it? Do you think them two sort of marry together?
Yeah, I think it's a few things, because women are having kids later in life now, focusing more on their careers. So then, you know, as time goes on, unfortunately, the chances of having a baby does decrease. So then if you are coming off the pill at that later age, it is going to make it more difficult. You can get things like post-pill PCOS, which affects your fertility as well. And it takes time to hopefully get your ovulation back after that. And I think our environments and our lives are very different now, particularly as we mentioned with the stress. If you're chronically stressed, your reproductive system's going to shut down, you're not going to be able to conceive. There's more toxins in our environment, in our food, in the water and the air, so that has a huge effect on both male and female fertility. So there's a lot of factors at play, but there's also a lot that you can do to support your fertility and improve your hormone health as well. So it's not all doom and gloom.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. So going sort of touched on it a few times, and I asked you before about the 3 habits and what you'd recommend. And you mentioned sort of quite a few wellbeing practices in there, sort of, getting outdoors, journaling, things like that. How important is the wellbeing side to you, as well as, coaching these people to get better nutrition, get exercise, get out the foundations? How much is wellness included in that, and how important is it to you to sort of include that?
Yeah, it's so important. You could have the most perfect diet in the world and the perfect exercise routine, but if you don't have your wellness under control, you're super stressed, you're not happy, that has a huge effect on your health. And even there was when I used to work in hospital years ago in like nursing homes, and lonely people died sooner, and the only reason they could put that down to was just their mental wellness, because they were eating all the same, doing the same exercise as all the other elderly people in the hospital and the nursing homes, but they were just lonely. And that it just shows what a huge impact your mental health has on your body, disease, your longevity, and your hormones as well.
I mean, that's just sums it up, doesn't it? I think I've heard of some similar studies with that, and sort of like older people in sort of homes and stuff. And I'm sure I read once about a study that women deal with it better than men. I'm sure there's a study, something that says, if women lose their partner when they're older, they live longer than if a man loses their partner. And I think probably makes sense, because I'd be absolutely useless without Nick. So, but it's all these interesting things in it, and I think well-being and wellness sort of, again, going back to what people think in the narrative, is that it's all a bit hippy-dippy bullshit, and it's all about like just meditating, but people see it as the wrong thing. Like meditating, for me, I meditate, I love it, but it doesn't mean I go and sit in the rain in my sheath and just hum as I do it. It's there's misconceptions, isn't there, about it? And I think it definitely has its place as like the foundations for people. So going sort of a question that I always like to sort of finish towards the end with is, if there was a routine or a habit that you have done in the past or haven't done and would like to introduce to your life, what would it be and why?
Interestingly, you mentioned the meditating, and for me, that would be it, because when I was struggling with my hormones in my undergrad, it was causing these crazy panic attacks, and I had to go get some therapy, and started meditating to help with that. And then through improving my hormones, the panic attacks went away. But it also meant that I fell out of the habit of meditating. And it's the one thing that I haven't been able to get back into. And I would love to just start each day, like even 5 minutes, the Spotify or Headspace clip, to truly meditate, slow down my heart, empty my brain. That's, the one thing that I really want to get back into.
It's extremely powerful, sort of doing it and having a very sort of flippant relationship with it that I have, of sort of being really like on it, and I'm doing this and I'm going to get up to like doing half an hour a day and that. And then I sort of found that it's probably something you don't need to do daily. Well, for me anyway, I think it's something that you can just drop in and do it every couple of days, sort of when you're at that level when you need to step back and you need to sort of, you know, bring the speed down a little bit. And it's sort of interesting you said that, you know, you was doing it through a time you was like doing therapy and you was having these like anxiety and panic attacks. And then once that went, you obviously didn't feel probably a need to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very strong thing, isn't it? And people sort of overlook it. But it's such a bizarre feeling after you've meditated, isn't it? The sort of, you get a buzz, but you also feel like you could just drop to sleep. That's what I feel anyway. I don't know what's it like for you after you've finished.
It's just the quiet. It's I feel like my brain just doesn't stop talking, and when I do some meditation, like it just stops making noise for a little while. I love it. It's like having
There's always a
around.
there's always a bit in it, and it's like just listen to the noise around you, and no matter where you go, you always pick up on something dead random, and I think it sounds random. That's dead random for me to sort of point out, but it always makes me remember that, you know, we're always so busy and sort of engrossed by things. Like, you miss something that's there all the time. So, like, you know, you could do it on your living room and you can hear like the road for the first time, but it's there every day. You're just not tuned in enough to sort of understand it's there. And I think that's what I like about it. You're so present, which is obviously the point of meditation. And that's just something that we're not. I don't think as like today's society and the stress and sort of having our technology with us, although it's a great thing. I mean, that's how we're doing this. You know, without technology, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But to be truly present is an incredibly powerful thing.
Totally agree.
So before we go, if you don't mind, we'll catch up once I end this recording. But let people know where they can find you. Let people know where they can reach out, find your services, and find out more about you.
Yeah. So you can find me on all socials, Instagram and TikTok at Period Nutritionist, or you can go on my website, which is periodnutritionist.co.uk. Yeah, my DMs are always open. You can always have a chat on the phone. I love getting questions and talking all things periods, so don't hesitate to reach out.
I'll put all that in the description. But before we sign off, thank you for obviously sort of doing this, having this chat with me. I've definitely learned a lot. I've definitely seen sort of an insight that I probably would have never got unless I had this conversation with you. I think what you're doing is brilliant. I think obviously the sort of what there is available, which doesn't seem sort of a lot around this specific area. I think hopefully it grows and hopefully people sort of get in touch with you and sort of realise that if there isn't just one avenue, there's multiple avenues that they can go down. So thank you very much for persisting with my questions and my sort of lack of understanding. But yeah, it's been brilliant and thank you very much.
Thank you. No, thank you for having me. And it's been awesome having this conversation with a man and answering all your questions. It was great.
Good. I'm glad it wasn't too much of a tedious process for you and not too frustrating.
Not at all.